Well, how y'all doing, Derby Jack here? It is Monday. It is 21, and there's snow everywhere. We don't get a lot, so, I ain't going out in it. I don't need any nanoparticulates coming into the house with me today. Kind of funny, I'm going to do a little bit here about old Nebuchadnezzar in the book of Daniel, Old Testament. It's one of my favorite Old Testament stories because it puts you up against the one thing nobody wants. If you were to ask a bunch of people, if they were in a position to where they were going to be burned to death or they're going to be drowned to death. And I think most people would rather be drowned to death, unless you're afraid of drowning, and then, are you afraid of a little heat? A little heat, like, what do you cook a turkey on? What, 375? Maybe a little hotter than that. And I know it's wintertime, and maybe to warm your bones a little bit, warm something in there. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were those few, represent the few, the remnant, those who truly believed. It wasn't propaganda to them. My air conditioning isn't working right. Hold on for a second. All right, we're back again. I'm sorry about that. I had to turn that off for a while, making that racket. But anyway, so I think I left off somewhere about propaganda. Anyway, in respect of saying that, my favorite here in Daniel was the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Because these men were a great example of a remnant, I tell you, of people who truly believe. This is why when you hear me get on here, and I get on the churches, because they're allowing outside influences to tell them what it means to be a Christian. And somewhere along the line, these good Christians are playing a very, very dangerous game, because they are allowing Satan to get a foothold into their faith. God does not share his faith like that. You don't sit there and straggle back and forth. You don't sit there thinking that you can sit on the side and you don't have any responsibility. You are supposed to be, when you're born again, you're supposed to be in the fire. And yet Christians are afraid of the fire. They're afraid of the ridicule. And that's, here in America, that's what persecution in most cases is for Christians. In these, upper middle class, which they're trying to break down, but understand your mindset. If you're that upper middle class escalon, like upper Presbyterian type, middle class Presbyterian. Those are the squeaky clean looking churches, right? And then you got the upper echelon Southern Baptist, the rich, ones who've had fortunes, from bloodline to bloodline, from generation to generation. The wealth is there, and they're in the know. Like here in Tennessee, Vanderbilt's, which, Vanderbilt University, and they got their, historical hands in a lot of different things here in Tennessee, like in any other place, right? You probably live in maybe some small little town in Idaho or something like that. There was a Mason behind you who built your state, and there was money thrown around for certain things, and not to get off the track. But see, in all these churches, in many churches, there's only a few in those churches, if any, who truly believe, who truly trust, and who do not doubt for whatsoever moment. That's faith. When you're put up against a wall. I'm not going to read all of this. I'm going to be, we all pretty much know the story, and I will be summarizing to get through it quicker. I know a lot of you don't like long sermons, so I'm going to try to condense this a little bit. Chapter 3 of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold, whose height was 80 cubits, and breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Doran, in the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, governors. So we know he got everybody to come. It was sort of like the Golden Globe Awards. Everybody comes to worship. Yeah, the Golden Globe Awards, a very good example, okay? Any of those award shows. You were a good puppet. You did everything we told you to do. You jumped through rings. Yeah, you pushed our agenda, and you got many people hooked. Here's your award. Yeah, your award for selling out your soul. That's what their award ceremonies are. So Nebuchadnezzar builds this image of himself. I'm not going to get into the graphics of what that image actually was, but it isn't what you were taught in Bible study. People in those days, an image of what was to show its potency of the king. His able, whether he has many wives, how potent, how many children is he able to produce. That is why, from our point of view, that's pretty perverted. Well, in a way it is. But from their point of view, it was a show of strength, vitality, okay? So whenever there were those type of images there, okay, do not take it in today's way of thinking. Understand it was a cultural thing. So anyway, Nebuchadnezzar put this, in the plain of Doran in Babylon, so everybody could see it, and everybody had to come after they heard a certain music, and all the captains, all the treasurers, everybody had to come to this award ceremony. He was going to unveil this big giant erect thing, okay, and it was to dedicate for him, and he wanted everybody to come to that dedication. So, and after they heard this, in verse 5, that what time they heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackcloth, psaltery, dulcimer, all kinds of music, right? That they are to bow down to the image in which Nebuchadnezzar had made, right? Now there are little tattletales, We know who y'all are, the little tattletales. We don't like Derby Jack. He hurts our feelings. Take him off. So you got those type of people, and that Nebuchadnezzar had the same type. I mean, these are the type of guys who would sit there and sell out Nebuchadnezzar if they could get away with it. So anyway, therefore, at that time, when the people hear the sound, in verse 7, of all these music, 8, wherefore, at that time, Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. Accusations, okay? And said, let me see, heard, blah, blah, blah. Wherefore at that time Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. They spake and said of the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Already kissing up, you know how they are, They get on hands and knees, So anyway, they spake and said to Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. 10. thou, O king, has made a decree that every man, blah, blah, you see, you know how the ass, kissers on, shall hear the sound and the cornet and the flute and the harp and sackcloth, all the music shall bow down and worship the golden image you made. But 11 now, here they go. And whosoever falleth down not to worship, the image should be cast into the midst of the fiery furnace. There are certain Jews, O king, listen, there's certain Jews, here's the tattletales doing what they do best, right? Whosoever falleth down should worship me. Okay. Then he goes, but there are certain Jews, O king, thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Babylon, Radshak, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee, and they serve not thy God. Nor worship the golden image in which you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and his fire command, and to bring Radshak, Meshach, and Abednego, right? And they brought these men before them. And these guys, you can imagine, they got them in front of the king, and he got the king, man. They're sitting back, and these little, snot-nosed little, people work at YouTube, you know what I'm saying, and the people snitch because they can't help it because it hurts their feelings. So anyway, they're sitting back, and these guys sitting there, they're laughing back and forth. We're gonna get Radshak. They're gonna put him in the furnace. Yeah. So anyway, as they're sitting there laughing, king, oh king, he's getting all mad. So Radshak and Meshach, they here it is, okay. And Nebuchadnezzar in his rage brought Radshak, Meshach, and brought them before the king. And 14, Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, is it true? Radshak, Meshach, and Abednego. I mean, I thought you were good old boys. I thought, you come and play cards with us, on Saturday nights. Thought you were in. And then you don't bow down. So he's all, he goes, I'll tell you what, in 15. Now, if he be ready, that what time he hear the sound of the coin, he's going to give him another shot at this, right? Because he likes Radshak, Meshach, and Abednego. He don't want to throw him in, but, he's the king. He's got to save face, right? Show his manhood. And to keep his manhood. So anyway. He says, be ready when you hear the sound of the cornet, all the music, desolate, blah, blah, blah. And then fall down and worship the image in which if he worship not the image and cast in the same hour in the midst of the fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of his hands? And Radshak, Meshach, and Abednego, these little guys, little humble guys, they just sat there, there's Radshak, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said, O king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this manner, in this matter, okay? And 17, if it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. I can imagine Radshak, Meshach, they're sitting there and they're like, looking right in the eye and sat there and says, if he doesn't, but he will. I mean, they're like, that's how I get it, So in 18, but if not, be known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods. Serious, little guys, humble guys, they couldn't put up a fight if they tried, right? But we will not worship the golden image in which thou hast set up. 19, then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury. And the form of his vice, and was changed against Radshak. No, they're no longer the good old boys. No, you ain't coming Saturday nights to play cards no more. Oh, no, 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 no. We thought you were, now you're going to pay the price because he's got a save face. He really don't want to do this, but he's mad now. They're defying him. I mean, all he wants them to do is bow down, you know. From his point of view, just do it so, you know, we can get this over with. But they won't do that. They don't want to play because they're serious about their faith. They're not going to compromise just to stay alive. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. What examples? Many of us could not be, right? Many could not achieve that type of faith. Many today in the churches don't have that type of faith. So now he's all teed off. And they still say, you know, we're not going to bow down, right? So we go down, 18, 19. Then Nebuchadnezzar, full of fury and in the form of vengeance, and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I spake and command that they should heat the fiery furnace even 7 times hotter than it was, you know. So basically, the fiery furnace is not enough. This is why I always thought that he was a little nuts. Nebuchadnezzar, in his brilliancy, okay, he was sort of like somebody had some intelligence, maybe with a little Down syndrome, you know, and probably an idiot savant in his own way. That's what I think of Elon Musk. Anyway, so he's all so teed off. He's not only going to throw these men into a fiery furnace, which is usually used to melt metals, you know, as they were making implements of destruction, right? So he didn't need to do that, but he did it anyway. I mean, think 7 times, it's a little pit, you know, probably got stones around it, right? And that's where they would put certain metals and pans and stuff, you know, like making a pizza. So anyway, they have to have it a certain, but they wanted it even more, so they start putting the charcoal in, they start putting the wood in, whatever they had to burn, put the baby in, burn the babies and all kinds of, so they got, I shouldn't have said that, but they did things like that, believe it or not. Can't have these carcasses laying around. Sometimes, you know, the only burials that were allowed, probably in certain areas, were, you know, Egyptian burials, you know. Not like a, you know, coffin, putting it in the ground. No, you had to have rituals, you had to have a state, you had to have the papers to be able to do it in the first place. So, anyway. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego decide they're not gonna bow down no matter. So they, you know, and what happens, and you go, then Nebuchadnezzar said in fury, okay, heat it 7 times more, 20. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the fiery furnace. Now understand, these are little men, they're not going to fight. Don't have the muscles to fight big guys. So he gets the biggest guys to go. Now understand, he had just made this furnace 7 times higher. So you just imagine the heat now radiate. If this was a stone kind of wall, kind of oven. Imagine the heat radiating now through, you know, maybe there's a ramp, you know, and that's the, you know, and just imagine you're going up this ramp and you're pushing these little guys ahead of you because it's getting hot. You're a big guy, you're hairy, you know, and all of a sudden you're getting closer and closer and you feel the heat. You're the one's got to throw them in. At an oven now, that's not normal heat. It is now radiating maybe 7 times higher, right? 7 times higher. And that radiation is so hot that you can't breathe as you're going up. You're a big, mighty man, but now you're about as weak as the weak guys you're getting ready to throw. and you get up that ramp, but what does it say? Then these men were bound in their coats of the hosen and their hats and other garments, and were cast into the midst of the fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flames of the fire slew those men that took Radshak, Meshach, and Abednego. So what happened? 7 times higher. They're getting close. To them, it's like the sun. They're getting close, right? And the closer they are, the hotter it is. But they have to obey their king. To do anything less is sacrilege. To do anything less would be a traitor. To run away, even to death, you'll have to prove yourself. You're a mighty man. He picked you to do this job. You believe in your king, and he sends you to do this thing. And in doing it, you throw these 3 men, Radshak, Meshach, and Abednego. You're a high guard. You're the strongest. And at the same time, your skin is burning to death and you're dying. And you incinerate right there. That's how hot it was for those men. Those poor men, those poor mighty men were led up to their burning, to their deaths. They did not deserve to die like that. Like neither did Radshak, Meshach, and Abednego deserve to be thrown in. But now those mighty men are gone. And their faith led them to their death. Because they had a wrong faith. Their idols stayed idle when they called. If they called at all. Back then, the Pharaoh was considered a god. And that God sent them to their radiative death. So, then these men, okay, and their hats and all that, we're all there. Okay, so we go to 22. Therefore, because the king's command was so urgent, the men that took them, they disintegrated, okay? And these 3 men, Radshak, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down abound into the midst of the fiery furnace. And then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, was astonished and rose up in haste and spake and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound in the midst of the fiery? They answered and said, O king, this is true, O king, okay? 25, he answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men. Well, they say men, but it was angel or creature, depending on translation and going back, whether it was 1611 or whatever. Angel was another being, okay? Extraterrestrial, if you will, okay? But angelic being. Angelic meaning angel, like servant. Servant for God and man. Okay, you understand? So. All right. And these men, Radshak, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down. Then Nebuchadnezzar, astonished, rose up and said in haste, Did we not? Okay. And they said, yes. 25. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4, okay, angel or whatever, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And in the form of the 4th is like this, they would said here, the Son of God, but that would once again be like an angel of God and or a son of God, not the son, okay? Sons of God were like what it said in Genesis. You know, the sons of God came down, okay? They were the angelic beings who fell, and they came down. They were also sons. They were created. Lucifer was the greatest of them all who fell. That was his sin. He wanted to be even above his own creator. So, what's happening here? We go to, what is it? What do you say? And he answered at 25 and said, Lo, okay, and no hurt. And one is in the form of an angel, okay? Then Nebuchadnezzar came near of the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God. He finally gets that their God is the Most High God. That's the only thing he can say. He had to put that title because it's not his gods. They don't do that type of stuff. They can't. Anyway. Fiery furnace and spake Shadrach, Meshach, okay, right, okay. Let's say 27. And the princes and the governors and the captains and the kings and counselors gathered together and saw the men whose bodies had not been hurt or nor in the power of the fire, no singe on their clothes, no, all that. They all passed by them, no smell, no nothing, Smelt, they washed them in downy, the same, Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed, I got thrown off there. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed are the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel. See, now they go back, angel. They go back to the right translation. And delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, and they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I spake a decree that anybody says of any land, say anything against them, that they, blah, blah, blah. So, understand now, let us think about the men. Not the men who were burned up, but the three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Nobody ever thinks about the great faith that allowed them and did not deny the flames. To go in there and feel the heat, and all of a sudden, was it like immediate when they were thrown, when they were brought up there? Was there already a protection? Did they feel any heat at all? What was their faces like? Were they calm? Did they know? For they said in denial, We shall not bow down, O king. For us to bow down, then we would bow down in disbelief. And neither Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were going to go that route. And they said, even if he doesn't. And they didn't say it in doubt. They said it to make a point. Because what did they say right after, right? We will not bow down either way. Build your 7 times. We will not bow down. Because he will, in their hearts, in their minds, their belief was, he will save us, O king. Not for our sake, but for your sake, basically. That wasn't written, and that would be considered adding, but just imagine at the moment when you would be there. If you were going to add anything into the cultural, that was what you have to understand. This was a cultural thing now, because now a movement in the heavens manifested in the eyes of a king who did not believe in that God in the first place. All of a sudden, he has become belittled in the eyes of a God, but still to basically admit, but still keep his person, his kingship, to still keep that face, okay? He had to learn now to pendulate, to play ball. As they did until the point of their faith. So I go back to the men, each one with that same faith. If there are 3 or more gathered in his name, and what was sent to them to protect them, they had a spiritual presence, science fiction people. They had a force field around them. Yes, they did. They had a spiritual force field that actually protected them in the physical realm. You can't wrap your head around it because it's the same thing trying to wrap your head that the Spirit of Christ that dwelled in Jesus' body is that same Spirit of Christ that he set. That everyone who believes in him gets that same Spirit. So if you are a spiritual person, then you have that. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they didn't have the spiritual Christ in them. But what they did have was that faith, that same faith in their own mindset and in their own bodies of flesh. So imagine how much harder it was for them to have that faith right in front of them, and as they're going up the plank, to believe that they would be saved. And they had a faith that was stronger than ours, or in this realm right now, most Christians don't even have, even as they have the power of the Holy Spirit of Christ in them, which Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't have. Their faith was greater without the Holy Spirit than most of you out there with the faith of the Christ, of the power of that Spirit of Christ that dwells in you. Their faith is greater without it. Most of you don't even know how to use what you got. In an emergency, you might have all the tools. Do you know how to use them? Yeah. So you have been given that measure of faith that I always keep harping on, right? And I have to keep putting the pieces together for you. That measure of faith that's given to you, you're the one that has to build it up. You can't piggyback off other people. You can't try to make yourself feel better to do something. It's not about what, it's about your faith in what you're doing when the war or the battle reaches you and your home in the physical. We do not fight against the physical. We fight against principalities, but the time is coming, and the time is basically here, that the spiritual presence will manifest itself in the real world. And it has, but most Christians don't see it. Most people don't see it. And that would be like witches that operate and steal the souls of your daughters. The Taylor Swift witches. You got that with the Beyonce, who they're doing the same thing. The messages. And most people are blind. They do not see. They are constantly told that we don't know what we're talking about. The religious people are the problem. Oh, the far right, this and that. That's Hitler propaganda. Don't you understand what they're doing? They're giving you a communist, socialist, pedophiliast, whatever kind of nation they're turning this into. It ain't the nation that you voted in, did you? I mean, if you're a Democrat, an old type Democrat, not the new, dress wearing, no. The old Democrat, who had some type of scruples about themselves. You can't agree with your side anymore, can you? Then you got the Republicans who are just too damn stupid, and they don't run anything, They can't even run themselves, I mean, it's pitiful. Like I said, why are we allowing the District of Columbia to run the states? They can't even run their own selves. All they do is run their mouth, and nothing's ever done, and nothing ever gets said. And nothing what they say is real. And they're a bunch of, I always call it Hollywood, D.C. It ain't no different than the monkeys over there in California, right? But real faith, is the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They felt the heat, I believe. But they were protected. And God sent an angel and did that angel did have a force field that was allowing them not to be hurt. It's probably a nice 72 in that bubble. Understand what I'm saying? Perfect, because there was no smell. So it had to be a force field. For all you science fiction people, there had to be a force field. A spiritual force field manifested in the physical realm. That's more exciting than anything Hollywood could throw out. When you start understanding, why did they take books out of the Bible that we know today? Because it was giving you too much science facts that they can't fight against. They fight every day. NASA fights to keep the narrative going that you're on a ball flying through space. They don't want you to look up. They want you to stay in your phones, because if you start really looking up and understanding, why are we flying? How can we fly if everything's still the same? Every constellation, the stars in the same place. Explain to me how we're flying. And it don't. And authority, I mean, is the word of God as far as I'm concerned. So what the God says in the word, I believe. And what spiritually, when I believe, my spirit's saying, about time. That's the Spirit of Christ. That was in Jesus. Now it's in you. If you're operating it, and if it's there, make sure. You know, when you went to the pool, did you get thoroughly washed, or were you thoroughly washed? See, you should have already been thoroughly washed, because that water don't do a damn thing for you when it doesn't, it's only on the outside. Maybe you need to, wipe those stains off, but if you should have already been prepared, already been what you're supposed to be, for all you water baptism type people. So anyway, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were in that bubble. They're praying. They're thanking God. They're sitting there ecstatic. You gotta believe these old little men are sitting there, ha ha. I mean, as humble as they are, they must be in there, as those little, because they're probably thinking of those other little guys who now, they've come out, right? They went through all this and they believed it. They come out the other side, not a singe. And as they get off the ramp on the other side and they get away from all that radiation, the angel's still there. And then as they're in a regular area, that angel, the force field goes away. Right? So the angel is pulled back. And probably the angel went back to God. Maybe disappeared. And Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego are sitting there. Oh, king. King's like, okay, I play ball. Anybody says, and he would go on, anybody says anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, they will be thrown in a fire, right? So in saying that, I want you to think about the faith. These three men, probably older men, little guys, wouldn't hurt a fly. And couldn't probably. Maybe they weren't like the Chinese, jiu-jitsu, No, nothing like that. So they're humble men. They come out. And now the strength of what had just happened, old Nebuchadnezzar had to change his heart. It's not meaning that he really wanted to, but what do you do? How do you tap that? How do you top that? You can't. It's like Moses opening the water, with the staff, and all of a sudden the water opened. And, how do you top that? You can't. I want you to think about your faith. I want you to consider what your faith is. I want you to be sure that you are learning and growing and letting that measure of faith grow in you by studying, the word, and trying to live it, and be willing to walk out of your comfort zone and not always sit in the back. If God puts something on your heart, you could be in a store somewhere. Whether you're a woman or whether you're a man, you could be, and somebody's there, and all of a sudden God's sitting there saying, spark a conversation with them. But you don't want to do that. You want to, I'm just saying, I don't like going out to stores, but if I had to and I was in a position like that, and God says, I need you to speak to this person. So you go out of your comfort zone, you do what God says. Because if you trust in God in the little things, and that would be considered a little thing, and God is able to come out, why do you need something big to prove the same thing? See, that's what they got you doing. They gotten you to the point where most of you Christians out there, you want to believe in God. You go to church. A lot of people go to church to find God, but a lot of times they get used because most churches are not showing God anymore. They're not showing the Spirit of Christ. They're not showing a welcoming. I mean, if I went to a Baptist church that is allowing, transgender and homosexuals to stay there and not be changed, for me to walk in that church and see that, that's an embarrassment to me. And I would have to get up and walk away, because that is not a church of God. That has nothing to do with my Heavenly Father. You're allowing the sin and the sinner without any confrontation of sin. I can't be in anything like that, because that means that you've got devil spirits in here and allowing it to happen. I have to leave. So that's where a lot of you come out. Well, you're judging. Well, yes, I am. I'm sorry. I have a right to. If my fellow Christians are falling away, I will do exactly what Paul does. He writes letters. Look, I told you about this, and I'm hearing reports about you over in Thessalonica. What the hell are you all doing there, Swapping wives, Colossians, I mean, all kinds of stuff. Committing adultery, over drinking, starting to fall away. So, yeah. That's the thing they don't want you to do, because they're teaching you in the churches not to judge. And that's not what it means. And stop playing games with God. Only a small sliver, a remnant in this generation, if this would be the generation to go, if this was, I believe it's going to be in my lifetime. I don't know the day or time, it could be the day I'm going to die. What I'm saying is, people need to understand is that we're getting close. And you better know that that you're born again. You better know whether you're protecting that soul. That's what... You have that soul of God gave you, and you're supposed to protect it now that you're born again. You have a responsibility. No, that has nothing to do with works. That has to do with a responsibility. You were given a gift. I'm teaching you to open up that gift and let the gift grow. And while you studying and showing yourself approved unto God, being a workman, rightly dividing, all of that, right? But at the same time, it's up to you to move. They'll allow the Spirit to move in you. When you're born again, it's your responsibility to work your salvation. It's your responsibility to work in your life when it comes down to your faith. I am learning certain things that God is putting in my path. And whoever you all are, God has got to put things in your path, okay? And sometimes paths can cross, but that doesn't mean that paths are gonna, be stagnant together. So for people, understand that there are people that in your family you need to have that relationship with, if can be, and if not, that you are set apart, as I had been set apart. So, in areas of my ministry and then also in areas of my music, I basically am a one-man band, if you will, in that respect. That is my ministry for now. So I do what the Father tells me. And the reason I brought all that up is that, like I said, most Christians in this country are spoiled Christians. They don't know what real persecution is. And when persecution knocks at your door to the point of gunpoint by an occupation, which is the actual federal government military, you were occupied from the inside, which means your government was against you from the very beginning. And those monkeys that you voted in did you in. It's coming. You don't see it yet. You don't want to believe it. But believe me, it's coming. So in saying that, I thank you for all who have given to me. Please, if it's within your means and it's moved by the Holy Spirit, I'm a minister who takes donations. A penny, $1, $5, 20. That's between you and God, and I always say, don't do it unless it's moved by the Holy Spirit to do it. You pray on it. Then whatever you decide you can give within the, within your means, pray over it first before you send it. I have a PayPal. I got a GoFundMe. They both work properly, though they should. Also, like I said, it's like my music channel. If not my ministry, if you like the music, please, Derby Jack Christian Blues, you haven't, please. I could use your donations to stay on air. I have programs I have to be paid for and stuff to try to keep on here. So whatever you can give, if it's moved. If you can't give, I don't take anything from anybody who can't afford, but I can definitely afford the riches of prayer. So if you're a spirit-filled person who likes to pray and you are powerful Christian, that means that I want your prayers, because your prayers are the type of prayers that move things, and that move the spiritual world, which also in returns moves the physical world, you see, and that's good. So as I say all that, so remember the people of Maui. Don't forget the people of Maui. Don't forget the people in harm's way, that if they die saved. And I thank you all who have been with me. Please continue, and like I said, please spread my music. Put thumbs up if you think my music's good. And like I said, keep praying for me as I pray for all of you. Derby Jack out, and I hope to see you all on the other side.